The sky tonight is blacker than I've ever seen it before. It swirls with slow malevolence, growling in mourning. My scarf is pulled up to my eyes, but my cheeks and nose are still burning pink with the bitter cold regardless. I'm in line with the others, waiting to board the ship that'll take me from the rig. The winds tonight are too powerful for helicopter travel, so ship it is. It's a military vessel, Royal Navy. The gray-white waves crash against its hull. Spray carries up to the Union Jack ensign stamped on the side. I'm not sure if the ship's military nature makes me feel more or less afraid. But I don't have a choice. 7 workers are always selected to board. Always. And tonight, I'm one of those 7. My name is Reg. I spent alternating months working on an oil rig in the North Sea. The work is not as bad as you might expect, and the pay grade is actually rather good. The boredom is the worst part. The isolation. Interspersed with moments of intense stress and lightning-like panic. We get Wi-Fi on the good days, but it's spotty at best. If you like your YouTube with 144p with 20 minutes of buffering time, then the rig is the right place for you. There's about 200 of us here at any given time, and honestly, sometimes it's kind of nice. During the day, in rare hours of warmth, the sun sparkles off the pipes and railings in the white and bright yellow. The mood is cheerful. Everyone has their purpose. Everyone has their role. Then the other times. You'll find yourself stood on the bridge in the grim hours before dawn. Frozen in place as you desperately try to fix the shitty job the engineer before you did on the generator that powers the crane. Made all the more difficult with the torn and battered gloves that limited the motions of your already shaking fingers. The protective goggles quickly steamed to the point of uselessness, so you take them off, only for the icy rain to lash out all at once into your eyes. What can I say? There's good days and bad days, can't complain. My shifts on the rig are typical. As I mentioned, 1 month on, 1 month off. We get helicopters back as a squad of about 20 or 25. We go our separate ways once back on the mainland. And then I'll see some of them again next month when we return to work. Occasionally, some of them will get moved to other rigs. Pretty straightforward. But there's an anomaly. One that I've always wondered about. I've asked around, but no one is able, or perhaps willing, to give me a straight answer. 5 days before the end of my shift on the rig, 7 of my colleagues are selected, randomly, or otherwise, I don't know. They're chosen late in the afternoon, told to gather their belongings, and then by night, they're gone. Move to another rig is all I'm ever told on the matter, when I can actually find someone to give an answer at all. This happens without fail. 5 days before the end of my shift, every shift, and it's done it since I first began the work early in the year. The people that are selected, I never see again. Most times, if I even know them by name at all, they're only acquaintances. But sometimes I've known them personally. I had the details of a man who was chosen 4 months ago, and a good friend of mine, a guy named Figs, was called for the previous assignment, but they've both stopped answering their calls. Most of us use crappy phones offered by the company during our shifts on the rig, so it's possible the devices were just ditched in favor of better models upon the return to the land. But still, I can't shake the unease. And I'm not sure why I seem to be the only one who's concerned. Not that it matters now anyway. Today marks 5 days before the end of my shift. And for the first time, I find myself as one of the workers selected. Normally, when I'm able to catch their departure for myself, they leave by helicopter. But tonight the sky is too fierce. So the aforementioned military ship has pulled itself up alongside the rig. Why exactly our departure has to be on this particular night? Why our journey is important enough to warrant a Royal Naval battleship to personally escort us to a new location? I do not know. I asked some of the other 6, my fellow chosen colleagues, but they know just as little. One by one, we are ushered down the line, out of the biting rain from the edge of the platform and into the body of the ship as a storm hammers down overhead. We are led through cold and narrow metal corridors and into a meeting room of sorts, where we awkwardly take the offered seats. The ship groans and churns. The engine rumbles steady from down below. And 2 men make their way between us to the front of the room. One walks slouched. His beard and hair are scruffy, mid-50s perhaps. I recognize him. He makes appearances on the rig from time to time, but he's not a regular lodger. Nor do I know his name. He placed forms on the desk before us as he meandered from person to person. The other man's pace is measured and deliberate, straight-backed. He turns at the head of the room and takes us all in a cool silence. He wears an immaculate white shirt beneath a blue-gray jersey and a naval cap, also in white. It's ringed at the base and visor in sleek black and shining gold, and his shoulders are bedecked with epaulets in the same colors. Once the scruffier man is handed out with the last form, he stands in the opposite corner, chewing his tongue as he looks over us. The man in white stepped forward.
Gentlemen, my name is Captain John Irons, and I am command of this destroyer.
Destroyer? What the hell? Why would a tiny team of oil riggers need to be transported on a bloody destroyer?
I'll get right to it. The forms before you now, if you signed, will bind you to the Official Secrets Act. Your involvement in this operation will be entirely secret. You will be forbidden to discuss the operational logistics, machinery, or any self-assumed purpose of the assigned rig, even to members of your own immediate family. For all intents and purposes, any military involvement in your assignment will be purely extraneous, operating on an ad hoc basis in the event of threat-to-life weather events.
The captain clenches his jaw and scans the room from left to right.
You have all been selected for this temporary position based on a combination of factors, including your specialist knowledge, your time served, and the results of your personality and psychological assessments. You are welcome to refuse this assignment. If you choose to do so, you will be escorted off the ship and back onto the rig, where you will see your allocated time. If you accept the offer, and you must come to a decision in the next few minutes, it is recommended that you spend your journey time reading through your contracts. If, upon docking at the assigned rig, you decide that you no longer wish to sign the document before you, then you will be given a room and confined to your quarters for the duration of your service, and may remain confined for a period of up to an additional 2 weeks, depending on the schedule of the ship in question. Is that understood?
His question was followed by a strained silence, one which eventually breaks into a series of low mumblings and bewildered nods from the people around me.
Should you choose to accept, your pay rate for the following 5 days will be increased tenfold, and will, in practice, be worth the equivalent of 2.5 months of solid service.
My colleagues exchanged a series of glances and raised eyebrows. The energy in the room changes somewhat.
You will be expected to perform your role to the best of your abilities, of course.
The captain continues.
And as discretion is of the utmost importance, to ask as few questions as will allow you to see out your duties.
His sharp gray eyes stopped on mine, just for a moment, before flicking over to meet those of the fellow in the corner, the scruffy man who occasionally visits the rig. My rig. A chill passes through me, but I say nothing.
I will now ask if anyone would like to refuse the offered assignment and return to the rig. Now is your one and only chance to do so.
Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. I thought about it. I really did, I swear. This whole thing has me set very much on edge. And this assignment, this offered assignment, this man, this military guy, who the hell is he to issue us job terms and warnings and ultimatums? A part of me wants to just scrunch the document into a ball and throw it in his face and march proudly back out into my rig where I belong. But this opportunity to venture out into the unknown, this is some real exciting shit. I don't even care about the money that much, to be honest. I've been given a chance to see behind the curtain, to find out what happens to the 7 who leave the rig, to find out what's so important about our destination. Mysteries have been presented to us. Mysteries that demand solving. I have to know. I just have to know. So I stay seated and listen to the dulled roar of the wind through the walls. Perhaps that's how they convinced the 7 to stay every time. Maybe the money is just so we can rationalize our decisions. A tense moment passes when the captain looks over our shoulders and nods to someone at the back of the room. I turn in my seat to see an officer raise a radio to his mouth as he steps through the door, speaking into it as he walks away down the corridor. And a minute later, the rumble of the engine below groans like rolling thunder, and the ship, I can only presume, as there are no windows in the room, groans into slow life. The captain nods to us, then to the man in the corner, and takes his leave, strolling away at once. And so we begin our voyage to the assigned rig, plowing onwards through the storm. I read through the Secrets Act before me as we made our journey over the waves. There's some seriously cool concepts in here. Makes me feel a bit like a spy. Though, there's some terrifying stuff too. The time drags on. I wonder exactly where it is we're going. Left with nothing but the sounds of the engine, the flicker of turning paper, and the occasional grunt or cough from my colleagues. My mind begins to wander. They swirl with curious, dark, clouded thoughts. Dread creeps up on me. It ebbs and flows, coming and receding like the tide. And I start to wonder if I've made a huge mistake. We were forced to decide so quickly. I tug at my collar. My stomach turns. I look up, and I meet the eyes of the man still stood in the corner. I clear my throat and sit up in my seat. "Excuse me, mate. Don't I recognize you? I see you on the rig sometimes." The man is silent for a moment, then scratches his beard.
"Aye. Work takes me from rig to rig. You have a good location. Less stormy than most."
"What about the ones we're going to? Will it be stormy there?" I asked. The man sighs, not with frustration, perhaps just with tiredness.
Yeah, it'll be storming all right."
The others seem a little emboldened now. The seal is broken and the questions start coming. "Which rig is it? Will any of us have been stationed there before?"
"No,"
the man replies.
"No, you won't have been. This one ain't charted. Officially, it didn't even exist."
"Is it military owned then? Like a secret Navy supply of oil? Is that why we've been taken by battleship?" The scruffy man's eyes dart to the door at the back of the room, and he rubs his nose.
It ain't an oil rig as such. The machinery and the systems will be similar to what you're used to, however. As the captain said, for all intents and purposes, any military involvement in this assignment is officially ad hoc. In an event of emergency. Less said the better, etc., etc.
"But if it isn't oil," I ask. My blood, for reasons unknown, pumping fierce. Then what is it? What's its purpose? And why is it secret? Silence falls, and the man, in a low voice, replies,
"Honestly, lads, You don't need to concern yourself with the rig's true purpose. Nor do I recommend you try to understand. Please, I don't even know myself, I swear it, and it's better this way. I appreciate that this is a frustrating answer, but I must emphasize that it is in all our best interests for you to just do your work, take your money, and get the fuck home. Do you understand me?
I nod quietly, and the crew alongside mumble their acknowledgments. The gears in my mind begin to turn and grind bitterly as the curious ship sails into the night. It is well into the earliest hours of the dark morning by the time we arrive. The sky still black and angry as we depart the destroyer. I slip and stumble against the rail as the ship rocks over the surface of the swirling sea. We all sign the Secrets Act, of course. How could we not? The captain alights the ship alongside us, and as we hurtle awkwardly on the rain-soaked platform of the rig, he goes to exchange some words, unheard, with a man in a uniform I did not recognize. Obscured mostly, anyway, by an enormous blue jacket. I squint my eyes through the downpour and take in my surroundings. The rig is colossal. Bigger than the one we departed, and hectic. Even at this time of the night, the place is alive with people, in heavy overalls, in military uniforms. Soldiers can be seen patrolling at every level of the giant metal derrick, rushing to and fro. A group passes right by us. Most have the British flag emblazoned on their arms, but a couple towards the back have Norwegian insignia instead. Lamps and searchlights illuminate the rain in thick, heavy streaks as they scan the bridges and platforms. Distorted shadows thrown across their surface by the rails and pipework. But inside the derrick, protected by the great iron skeleton, there is no pipeline for any oil. There's no hose that I can see, no drill line at all. I raise a hand to my eyes and shield them from the rain. I take a step away from the group and stare, even as a powerful beam of light washes over my face. Inside the crisscrossed metal tower is an enormous, monstrous chain. The largest that I've ever seen. Each link must be the size of a car at the least. It is colossal and terrifying, in a way I do not quite understand. And standing here on the platform only a few meters away, I find myself feeling very small. Very small indeed. The chain disappears behind the beams of the tower that supports it, and below the surface of the platform. It extends, presumably, deep down under the sea. For what purpose, I do not know. I'm suddenly slammed into from behind. I stumble in shock and turn to see who pushed me. And a roaming light shows me a man with a hard hat in his outstretched hand. His eyes bloodshot red and shadowed with dark circles. He's a mess. And when he looks at me, it feels like he's staring right through me. "Are you lot the takeover crew then?" He croaks out in a voice, hoarse beyond exhaustion. Shane looks with the men around me. "Yeah. I reply uneasily. Yeah, I think we might be. A siren suddenly sounds off the far side of the derrick, a loud and obnoxious wail, and we jump and start an alarm. Well, us new arrivals do. The embattled man before me does not even flinch. He just closes his eyes and starts shaking his head. No, he mutters. Then louder. No, fuck! No more! He slams the hard hat into my stomach and marches past. The soldiers have begun bellowing orders, but I can't hear them above the wind and the blare of the siren. The platforms and the pipes light up alternatingly in orange and blue. Fear ripples through me as the platform beneath me starts to shake. Captain Irons from the ship is suddenly in front of us, barking orders. He's hastily reading off the list of names, telling my colleagues where to go, and in a chaotic scramble, they do as they're told. This does not seem like the time or place for questioning of roles. The ground shakes. I hear the waves crash against the legs of the rig, and for that to even be possible, for me to hear them above the bellows and the roaring gale of the shrieks of the siren, they must be colossal indeed. I can see some of the sea out of the corner of my eye, and it's a picture of wild, dark, and churning fury. But my gaze is focused on something else. Blood pounds in my ears to join the cacophony. I am vaguely aware of the captain shouting my name, but I fail to copy his orders. He stepped forward now, shaking my shoulder vigorously. But I cannot move. I am frozen in place in blind terror, and don't even know why. There's something about this rig that isn't right. It isn't right at all. And I can't tear my eyes from the great chain. The terrible chain, obscene in its size, is no longer still. It grinds and shakes with the storm, and I watch in disbelief as it starts to unravel, as if something, some unknown force, is dragging it desperately deep below the surface. The great chain grinds. Its monstrous metallic howl reverberates through the platform that I stand upon with shaking legs. The chain is moving. There's no doubt about it. Something is pulling it slowly down below the surface. I can see a section unraveling. I watch as it feeds reluctantly through a series of monstrous gears from an adjacent, slightly smaller tower. The captain is still shouting into my face. The rain and the beams of passing searchlights wash off the shine of his gold-black visor. His words eventually start to break through the wail of sirens and the rush of the waves and into my petrified daze.
Reg! It is Reg, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The captain's eyes flash and he nods, drawing back a little.
Look to the right of the tower, Reg. Just behind. You see that gray cylinder?
I do. Waves of the siren's orange and blue lights roll across it again and again. Yes, I see it. The reservoir, right? For the hydraulics? The captain laughs out loud, a disturbing and ludicrous sound amidst the tumultuous, relentless chaos.
"Smashing,"
he says, clasping a rough and heavy hand on my shoulder.
"And you feel your feet in the ground. You have your bearings?"
Yes, Captain."
"Brilliant. That's your station, old chap. Off you go, on the double."
He tips his cap and strides off across the platform back to his ship. I watch him go for a second, and then I feel the blood return to my legs.
"Let's go, Reg. They're counting on you,"
I hear from behind. Yes. Right. This is my assignment. Here we go. Here we go. My feet splash across the surface of the platform as I head for the nearest metal mesh stairs, fastening the hard hat I'd been rudely gifted onto my head. The entire ground is like a rippling mirror, illuminated in flashes of white, of blue, and of orange. As soldiers sprint past me in formation, their shimmering reflections below run with them, distorted by the sheets of rain. My hand slips right off the watery rail as I ascend. I stumble past my fellow workers. I've already lost sight of the 6 I arrived with. They could be anywhere by now. Across the bridge over the reservoir, I can see the pipes and tubes to the hydraulic cylinders. Not quite the same as the ones back on my own rig, but similar enough. A sudden crash from behind has me swear in fear and swivel at once. And through the iron cage of the tower, the massive chain suddenly jolts down, an entire fan-sized link disappearing out of sight into the shadows below. Good Christ, what the hell is this place? I mutter breathlessly, cold rain streaking down my face. I fight my way through the storm to the cylinders. There's a team of about 9 or 10, difficult to tell, all swarming around the pumps and control valves. A guy in goggles looks over to me. "Hydraulics?" he calls through the rain. A great boom of thunder shivers through the sky to accompany the scream of the siren. Fuck. Yes? I think that's me," I call back. The goggled man nods and points me to a section of the cylinder. "Open that fucker up! See if it's working! Quick as you can, mate!" Jesus. I push through the bustle of my new comrades, adrenaline pumping, and I turn to hastily look through a box of tools for the equipment I'll need to remove the covering. A searchlight beam from afar scans across my immediate surroundings, and I catch a flash of blue coat thrown about the wind as its owner passes me by, crossing from an opposite bridge. It's the guy the captain was talking to earlier down on the loading platform. I turn to look up at him, drill in hand. "It's embarrassing is what it is," the man in the blue coat says to the officer at his right, as he strides past. He stands tall and walks with grim purpose. "4th siren tonight? Is this a piss take? This is the kind of shoddy control I'd expect over on the Danish rig, not on bloody UKA. "Commander!" the goggle man shouts, rain flying from his lips as he stands up straight, and the commander tips his hat to him in return. "Status?" the commander bellows, back rigid and hands quickly clasped behind his back as the wind drags his coat about his shoulders. I don't have a good look at his face, but I can see a thick white beard whipped around his jaw. "No major issue here, Commander," Goggles replies. "Hydraulics understood to be clear." "Fuck's sake," the commander mutters, casting an eye shrouded in shadow from his visor over the new colleagues. "And what the hell is the problem here? Too much slack on the chain?" He turns to the officer to his right. "Find out where UKB and the Norwegians are up to. The amount of times I've had to tell no rig to sharpen their shit this month. Bollocks to it. Let's bring this fucker under control. I do not want to deal with a 5th siren tonight." The commander and his entourage clatter their way across the bridge. I watch him raise an arm and gesture angrily to the groaning chain, looking like little toy soldiers beside it as they pass it by. We work on through the night. The rain eventually begins to fall back into a more bearable drizzle. The sea calms, and starts to settle. The waves against the rig's legs grow decreasingly violent, and the siren, mercifully, cuts out. The chain, too, is steady, brutally hauled back up through the tower and mechanically re-raveled. Like a fool, I had expected my shift to end there, for me to be allowed some desperately needed rest. But I was mistaken. My shift continued on through the night. It turned out there had been a minor fault with one of the hydraulic systems after all. But since the siren had ceased and we couldn't work out if this particular malfunction had been responsible or not, we agreed collectively not to mention it. It was not until the silvery light through the clouds above suggested that the sun had risen that I was dismissed. Like a zombie, I marched to my assigned dorm and collapsed into a narrow bed against the wall, and fell at once into a welcome and total sleep. I was the first one to awaken. My bunkmates were all still snoring away. I rubbed my eyes and brought my legs over the side of the bed, gently cracking my joints in my arms and my back. A clock on the wall tells me that it's 12:20 p.m. 5 hours of sleep. Great. I run a hand down my face, but I actually don't feel too bad. A piece of paper taped to the wall below the clock tells me that Hydraulics Team B are expected to return to work at 1:30 p.m. I'm assuming that one's mine, based on the accompanying time that we were dismissed. Someone has scrawled across the paper in pencil in the margin. It's today's date along with Commander's Orientation, 13:15. I quietly open the door, and after a quick splash of water to the face, a change of clothes, and an admittedly rather gross brush with a borrowed toothbrush, I decide to use my spare hour to look around the rig. The weather was calmed, and whilst the sun is not exactly shining, it's pleasant enough for now. The rig is just as busy as it was last night, but the air of panic has dissipated, thankfully. During my walk, I encounter one of the 6 from my previous rig, and we shoot the shit for a few minutes. I learn the location of the lockers where our belongings have been deposited, and immediately regret my decision to use the toothbrush of the unknown soldier. It's remarkably easy to tell which workers on the rig are new arrivals and which have been here for longer. You can see it in the lines of their faces, in their eyes and expressions, the way they carry themselves. The soldiers, however, are unreadable. I ponder their purpose as I make my way through the inner corridors of the rig's hub. If you walk like you have a clear direction in mind, you typically won't be bothered, I've found. I'm intrigued by what appears to be a small library nestled within the walls. A cluster of shabby bookshelves hold a range of battered books. There's some maps here too, of the North Sea, and of the rig itself, taped to the wall. It's as I'm studying one of these maps when something catches my eye. A word, scratched deliberately into the metal of the wall alongside it. It's not obvious, but now that I've seen it, I can read it clear as day. Figs, it says. Figs. A brief but sharp surge of adrenaline passes through me. Could this have been carved by Figs himself? By my friend? The very friend who was selected as one of the 7 for this rig the last time? It must have been, surely. Knowing that he was here sets me grinning, and I shake my head in disbelief. Why would he carve his name into the wall? I look around the room. I undo the tape and the adjacent poster and peel it back, but there is nothing but blank wall behind. After a moment of consideration, I grab a hold of the little bookshelf directly below the scrolling, and grunt with effort as I push it to the side. And sure enough, hidden behind, against the wall, are a series of further carvings. I'm not sure why, but I feel compelled to shut the door to the library room, so I do so before squatting down to study what has been written. There's a number carved here, 41134. A date, perhaps? Not like any date I've ever seen. Maybe it's a military system I'm not familiar with. There's also a drawing, a crude one. It looks like a little square, about to be devoured from beneath by a larger, bizarrely Pac-Man-esque shape. Or half of him at least. A semicircle, with a split for an open jaw. It's literally just a bunch of lines carved into the metal, but it unsettles me in a way I can't explain. Next to this drawing is the phrase, "Don't trust Potter," in capital letters. Potter? Who the hell is Potter? The sounds of footsteps in the corridor beyond bid me grab the bookshelf and quickly drag it back into place. Workers push through the door and I nod to them upon my exit before they have a chance to ask me what I was doing. 41134. Don't trust Potter. A drawing of a semicircle and a square. They all mean something, I'm sure of it. Figs left them behind, I know he did. With only 10 or so minutes left until the scheduled briefing by the commander, I decided to dwell on my findings on the rig's largest bridge, and an excellent vantage point for views of the surrounding sea. I can see few battleships dotted around in the distance from here. One of them could well be the destroyer belonging to Captain Irons. I can also see another 2 rigs like this one spread out in the distance, and if I squint, I can just make out the rough form of a third, far against the grim horizon. There's a guy stood nearby eating a sandwich. First person I've seen since arrival not actively engaged in the task of some kind. He seems in decent spirits, but his eyes are glazed and tired. He nods at me and I nod back. Then he gestures to the faraway rig with his sandwich. "That's the Norwegian rig," he mumbles. "No rig, they call it." "Ah," I reply. I'm not sure what else to say. "My name's Reg. Nice to meet you, mate." "Hi," he replies. "You too, pal. Dan." "Anything you can tell me about the chain, Dan?" "What chain?" he asks, and I furrow my brow in confusion. I'm about to gesture to the colossal metal links held in the tower, when he chuckles at me. "I'm just screwing with you, mate. I know what you mean. But I don't have any answers for you, I'm afraid. No bloody clue. They're keeping something locked down. That's all I know. It moves with the storms." He looks out to the sea. "And it's always stormy here." "You been here long?" 10 days. I'll be done in another 4. Second time they've assigned me to the rig. To my surprise, I feel a flood of relief. Ah, so people do come back from the rig then. And of course they do. The idea that they wouldn't, I silently brand myself a fool. Of course people move on from here. Why wouldn't they? "Second time?" I ask. "How long was your first shift?" 5 days. They keep trebling your pay with every subsequent return, apparently." He takes another bite, chews thoughtfully. "And a man needs it." "So what's up with the military presence?" He shrugs. "Who knows? Keep the Russians away, perhaps. Whatever they're up to here, it's important shit, clearly. I mean, look at all this." A trio of helicopters flies overhead as he spreads out his arms. I watch them pass. Yeah, maybe. I shift on the spot and think about what I saw scrawled on the wall. Would it be unwise to bring it up to this guy? To Dan? Screw it. "You know of anyone called Potter, Dan?" He gives me a strange look and pauses. "No," he replies. Can't say that I do. I only work on the uppermost deck, so my pool of acquaintances is relatively small. Military police here are nicknamed the Plotters, if that's of any meaning. No, but thanks anyway. He eyes me again, his expression changing, and he stands up straight. You know, you ask a lot of questions, Reg. To be honest, I'm wondering what you're even doing here. They don't normally send blokes like you, not in my experience. I laughed awkwardly, but Dan does not return the laughter. He just holds my gaze for a tense moment, then shrugs and looks back out to sea. I breathe. I guess your skills are just in demand right now, he muses. Realizing the time, I thank the guy for his conversation and head down to the briefing by the commander. I'm cutting it fine, but thankfully I'm not the last to arrive. He doesn't say much really, just gruffly goes over some basic logistics, highlights important duties for the day, and officially welcomes us to the rig. It's not a particularly cheery welcome, nor is it particularly interesting. He mentions that we were all subject to a lengthy debrief in Norway upon the end of our service. And then there's something else he says. Something that stands out. Something I dwell on well into the day. Whatever you may hear, he says, scanning the room, one eye bright and shining like polished brass, the other blinded, a scarred white-gray. Whatever you may see, it is suggested that you push that shit aside and save it for the debrief. I would remind you that the British government takes dissension from the Official Secrets Act very seriously. Very fucking seriously indeed. His eyes meet mine. As do I. I am worse than those fuckers in London, I can assure you. The tension holds the air still and thick and heavy. Then it breaks away like ice with a sudden clap. The commander nods and gestures to the door, and it's clear that the meeting is over. My day is uneventful. I learn little else and make no mental progress on the mysterious scrawlings, presumably left by Figs himself. My shifts are broken up into 6 hours on, 6 hours off. Rough. And it's nighttime when it gets rougher. The rains return, the swill and seethe of the storm, as if it's angry about the rig's very presence in its waters. I shiver as I check the lights on the enormous control valve before me. The tension is now palpable, far beyond anything I experienced in the commander's briefing. This is something else. All teeth are set, every pillar of eyes itching to glance up the silent siren. Soldiers and workers alike, all on edge, waiting, praying that the siren doesn't go off. The impeding potential shattering of the peace is perhaps worse than the shattering itself. And eventually, of course, it does. The siren cuts through me like a knife, and the world of metal around is cast in glows of orange and blue. Orange and blue. All along the bridges. The rails, the metalwork in the gears, the multitude of platforms and the giant towering derrick skeleton, and the chain groaning inside. The chaos returns. It's stressful beyond words. But the problem, wherever it came from, is after 15 minutes or so, fixed. And the siren stops. We breathe a collective sigh of relief as the brutal orchestra of our tempestuous domain cuts us some slack, for a while. Because after another tense hour, it sounds again. And then after that, it sounds again. I feel sick. This is relentless. Is this why they were so desperate to get us here? Because the previous crew were literally fit to collapse? But this time, the siren does not stop. It just keeps on wailing, screaming its distress out into the night. Fuck. It's so fucking loud. The frustration we feel grows into anger. Anger which quickly breaks down into shivering nerves, and then melts further into cold fear. Why won't it stop? Where's the commander? The guy in charge of our selection. Goggles, as I've nicknamed him, removes his helmet and runs his hand through his hair. "Again!" he shouts. "Check through them all again! Have we missed anything?" The chain jolts. To my horror, it swings slowly to the side and crashes into the side of the metal tower that contains it. The vibrations of the shock thundering through the entire rig. "Oh hell!" Goggles bellows in dismay. "Where's the fucking commander?" And then there's another noise. A boom that ripples through the air from the distance. I rise on shaking legs and lean over the rails, looking through the rain out to sea. A warship of some kind, closer than before but still a ways away, is firing upon the churning waves. Its turrets light up in brilliant white, and then a half-second later, they are followed by the booms and the rattle of fire. There's something in the sea. More ships are coming round through the haze. I can see them. I can see their lights. And the water between them shifts and swells in ways that don't make sense. The dark waves rise. Colossal. I wipe the rain from my eyes. I can't quite make it out. And I realize everyone is distracted. Distracted by the light show out at sea. The workers have shifted away from their stations. I can see all around. If I'm going to look for answers, the time is now. So I seize the moment. And with a quick look behind, I sprint away through the shadows of the rails. Keeping my head low, I make brisk pace down the shuddering stairs. I cross the platform, trying to look like someone who has a clear goal in mind. I'm about to push through the central hub of the rig when 4 helicopters fly out overhead. My mouth drops. To fly in this? They must be insane. But they're carrying something. Between the 4 of them, they're carrying a length of the colossal chain. The same type is held in the tower, and weighed down at either end by what I'm presuming must be massive, gargantuan anchors. I know I shouldn't be wasting my moment, but I can't help but watch as they fly out to sea, illuminated fleetingly in the glare of the warship's fire. And then they hover in place, as much as they can given the weather. And the chain is released. It drops through the dark towards the swirling sea and smacks into the surface with a crash. The spray slow and massive as the iron sinks. Blood pumping, I turn and push on into the hub. The map I saw in the library I recreate as best as I can in my mind, and I orient myself. I head to the staff quarters, the officers. I march with purpose past the groups of hurried soldiers, careful not to make eye contact. and at the end of the corridor I find what I am looking for. The map in the library had it marked only as a door, with no room beyond. But that was impossible. And sure enough, there's a room there, shrouded in darkness. Filing cabinets line the walls. There's a desk attached too, empty except for a bottle of vitamin D tablets. But this is good. Filing cabinets. Personal files in here, perhaps. Maybe I can find information on Potter, or about the chain. I know I'm an idiot. Most would just take the money, keep themselves to themselves, and go home. That's presumably why they get selected. But I'm not one of them. I'm just not. I run a hand over the cabinets. All locked, of course. Curious steel padlocks are attached to each and every door, all in the pattern of 00, 0, 0, 0. A light bulb goes on in my head. I recognize that pattern. It's the same as the number Friggs wrote on the wall. 41134. Alright, fuck it, I mutter to myself, cracking my knuckles before setting to work. Starting with padlock number 1 and working my way down, then across. Don't fail me now, Figs. I work fast, and it can't be more than a few minutes, but the time feels like it drags on. I'm expected to be rumbled at any second, for some officer to barge in and arrest me. But they do not. And on cabinet number 7, the padlock snaps open. Aha! I grunt with desperate glee, dragging the door open and rifling through the folders and files within. I grab a handful of them and drop them onto my desk, flipping them open and trying to absorb as much as I can. I don't really want to stick around. Frustratingly, the files aren't arranged alphabetically. There doesn't even seem to be any coherent order at all. There are pages and pages of reports, some with notes scrawled across a pen, or black redacted bars stumped over them. All drilling operations at site R-Skyn 3 to cease immediately. Report to Cedar R. Cleese, December 1986. I flip through another. I'm careful not to let the rainwater drip from my face onto the paper. Urgent. Redirection of UK nuclear program. Trident. Budget to R-Skyn 3 discovery. 17 to 18% recommended. Pending. January 1987. I don't have time to take in all the text. I just absorb what I can. Personnel to be assigned to new rigs UKA plus UKB for no longer than periods of 2 weeks maximum. Standardization with Norwegian and Danish rigs. NODA recommended. Greater personnel numbers suggest during winter months. Entity's true nature to remain at highest level of classification. I expel a breath of air from my lungs in a cold and unwelcome burst. Entity. I lift the file up towards the room's sole source of light. It flickers as the wind howls outside, and the siren blares. A scrap of torn brown paper falls from amidst the files and lands on the desk. My heart pounds as I pick it up and read through. It's a segment of a poem, handwritten in fine ink. Alfred Lord Tennyson, 1830, it says at the top. Below the thunders of the upper deep, far, far beneath in the abysmal sea, his ancient, dreamless, uninvaded sleep. The paper is torn, and the poem ends there. It is almost like I am watching myself from above as I stuff the papers back into the file with pink-tipped and trembling fingers. As I slam them back into the cabinet and remix the combination of the lock and stride pale-faced, stomach lurching back through the corridors, I realize that I have made a terrible mistake. I should never have agreed to make the voyage here. I should never have signed the Secrets Act. And I should never have allowed myself to get caught up in this madness. The entity's true nature. The entity. Don't panic, is all I can tell myself as I return to the storm. As the rain batters renew against my head and my back, as the lightning flashes, and as a terrible and alien roar sounds out over the sea, it stops me in my tracks, and is by far the worst sound I have heard since my arrival. And I've been privy to a great many disturbing sounds. It echoes out over the writhing waters and up into the swirls of the sky. And a great jarring force from below suddenly throws me to the ground. I slip across the surface of the platform, scrambling up to my elbows, barely able to believe my eyes as the edge of a huge iron wheel is forced up against the far side of the rig from beneath. I watch it as it smashes into a crane, one which promptly disconnects from the rig with the sound of tearing metal and crashes down into the churning sea. The chain grinds against the tower. All around me now is pure panic, and with a cataclysmic crash, I am powerless to do anything but watch as the great chain wins the struggle and smashes through the side of the skeleton tower in a shower of broken metal. It tears through the edge of the rig. It swings towards me, and it brings with it an enormous wheel from below, dragged round the edge of the cracked, far platform. And my screams become one of those of the siren. The great chain smashes through the side of the skeleton tower in a shower of broken metal. It tears through the edge of the rig, it swings round towards me, and it brings with it the enormous wheel from below. My screams become one of those of the siren, and a pair of rough hands grab me by the back of my jacket. I am hastily hauled across the platform through the rain as the chain swings by. It becomes clear that the links run through the colossal iron wheel, and because of them, they tear up the edge of the rig and smash the loading bays and the remaining cranes to shreds, as easily as if they were made of paper. The roof of the rig's central hub is destroyed in a hail of shattering beams and concrete as the chain smashes relentlessly right through it. The hands release from the scruff of my neck, and I slump to the wet ground with a splash. None of this feels real. It's like I'm in a dream. A terrible, swirling nightmare. I turn to look up at my savior, and a flash of lightning out of the sea illuminates the profile of the commander. His good eye shining in keen copper, the other shrouded in shadow. His coat is torn and his beard whipped wild.
To your station, lad.
He bellows in a voice like the rippling thunder. Glancing between me and the chain.
This night's not over yet, I tell you now.
I scramble back through the puddles and grab a hold of the nearby rail, trying to bring myself to stand. "What the hell is this?" I shout at him. "What are we going to do?"
"Our duties,"
he barks back. More helicopters fly out overhead, struggling through the wind. An officer approaches and stops to a shaking salute as the shuddering chain is steadily dragged out to the sea overhead. The rig trembles.
"Confirmed, Commander,"
the officer shouts.
"Catastrophic failure in the accused section, but it's too late, they say. There's nothing we can do now." "They'll be dealt with come in the morning," the commander replies. "Tell me about the pneumatics, the emergency reels. What have we got?"
"Pneumatic reel 1 is gone, Commander," the officer replies. "Completely destroyed. Reels 2 and 3 are fit for operation, though reel 3 has been damaged."
"Get them affixed to the tower, or hell, what's left of it."
Soldiers spring past in manic squads across the platform. The battleships fire into the waves in great roiling booms. "Both of them?" the officer asks uneasily. "But, Commander, the chain's current duress would suggest," he stutters. If we lose both the reels."
"Get them affixed!"
the commander roars.
"Now! Fucking now!"
The officer swiftly brings up his arm into a salute and sprints off through the broken, shifting shadows of the rails and the metalwork.
"Don't make me ask you again,"
the commander grunts at me, then turns to take his leave. But I call out after him, foolishly and desperately over the groan of the storm. Never in my life have I felt such dread. I am drowning in it. It feels like the end of the world. "What is this place, Commander? You have to tell me. What's down there?" I know, all right? I know about the entity. What is it? What are you hiding?" The commander stops in his tracks. His coat ripples and thrashes in the wind, in time with its distorted mirror image, reflected in the flooded platform below. He lights up from all angles in glaring orange, then blue. Orange, then blue. Random bursts of white from the searchlights, from the lighting, and from the artillery fire of the distant warships accompany the colors of the sirens in intermittent flashes. The shadows thrown are ever-changing and void black. He swivels on the spot and marches right up to me. I stumble back in alarm, but he grabs my collar. "Questions, questions, questions," he mutters, loudly above the clamor. "I hate when the questioners are brought on board the rig. You know that? I fucking hate it." His eyes are wide and mad as he begins to drag me across the platform. His worn and hardened features, his white beard. They are deceptive, I now realize. The commander is strong, and must be years younger than his looks would suggest. "You know where they love questions, Reg? That is your name, isn't it? The submarines." His words register sharp. A tide of panic crashes against my broken constitution.
I try to fight the commander away, but he trips me, throws me to the ground.
"They're struggling for crew," he says. "They weren't prepared for active deployment tonight. I was about to order them down anyway. But you know what? I think they'd benefit from your expertise. You're of no use to me on the rig tonight."
Visions of being trapped in a submarine flash through my head. Claustrophobic, cold, unforgiving metal, surrounded by only the icy, churning black waters and the horror beneath the waves. The pressure growing as we sink deeper and deeper. "No, no, I won't," I shouted. His features are shadowed once again, but his silhouette shines bright against the thunderous night sky. "So, you know about the entity. Well, you're not the only one who knows things, Reg. I know that you abandoned your station tonight. I know that you shirked your one duty to the rig. And I know that the hydraulic section, during your departure, has catastrophically failed." With every no, he takes another step closer, his voice rising. My heart lurches in distress. "Get your ass in that fucking submarine, and maybe I'll forget a few things. You understand me? Now on your feet. Are you a man or a fucking dog?" He hauls me up and drags me through a corridor of crisscrossed pipework and down onto a lower platform on the opposite side of the rig. A section with an edge that remains crack-free, unharmed by the drag of the colossal and broken iron wheel. He squats and hauls open a door in the ground with a clank. It reveals a rusted ladder that extends down towards the sea. He looks at me. Oh God. My options whirl around in my head to the beat of the siren's wails. I force my rain-soaked fringe from my eyes. What the hell do I do? What can I do? Run? Could I run somewhere? And what then? If by some miracle the rig survives the night, then they'll find you eventually, won't they? There's nowhere to run to. And you'll be court-martialed. Can civilians even be court-martialed? Would I just be shot on the spot? Or worse? Fuck. Forget being court-martialed. This is about your life. I swear with frustration. And what if the chain pulls the entire rig into the sea? What then? The submarine might literally be the safest possible place for you. But why the commander's change of heart? What the hell is his game here? All these thoughts and more froth and bubble like the foam of the gray waves below. But at the end of the day, there's no point pretending that my decision wasn't already made. In times of intense stress, chaos and disarray, when your options are as complex as mine, it is easier to simply follow the orders of the person in charge. Maybe with hindsight, I would have acted differently. I would have come up with some genius plan. But I don't have that luxury in the fire of the moment. So I furrowed my brow. I call the commander a prick. And I ease myself onto the ladder, bracing myself against its icy rungs.
"See you on the other side,"
the commander shouts at me. and I see him raise a radio from his belt to his mouth. He kicks the trapdoor closed as I begin my shaky descent. Down I climb, rung by slippery rung. The sound of the sea below grow louder. There's a monster down there. I'm sure of it. What else could it be? The entity. Rung after rung.
Oi!
Shouts a megaphone-distorted voice from below, breaking my train of thought, and I nearly slip from the ladder in fright. I grab a tighter hold and twist my neck to see below. There's not much of the ladder left. It goes down a couple more meters, and then the end is lost to the swirling, swelling waters. The uppermost hub of the great gray submarine has surfaced beside. It rocks subtly in the churn. I didn't even hear it rise. A man over in hydraulics has opened the hatch on top of the hull, his upper half visible. He waves at me.
Hydraulics?
His voice blares through the megaphone. I nod as obvious as I can. I force the fear from the lungs to shout out a reply. Yes. Fucking yes, that's me.
Great. Jump.
He replies. Jump? Jump? I can't bloody well jump. Shouldn't there be a boat or a bridge or...
I can't hear you, mate.
Megaphone replies.
Come on, quick as you can.
I bang my head against the ladder in anguish. But before I can psych myself out any further, I use the adrenaline to the best of my ability. Powering down the remaining rungs of the ladder, turning, calculating. And I push myself off. My legs kick through the ice and the salt of the sea air. My arms flail, and I land with a thud on the hull of the submarine. Megaphone reaches over and grabs my jacket, and he hauls me through the hatch and down onto the vessel's body. I use the rungs of the submarine's ladder to slow my descent, but essentially crash to the floor in a rain-soaked heap. I roll onto my side, coughing. I'm in hell. I choke out.
No, you're not.
Megaphone replies grimly, helping me to my feet. He then climbs the rungs, reaching up and draws the hatch closed with a slam. The sounds of the storm and sea are muffled instantly, largely replaced by a low and all-surrounding rumble.
Terry,
he says, sticking out his hand. I take it, shivering.
Reg. Thanks for coming down, Reg. We appreciate it.
I really didn't have much of a... I feel my surroundings shift. I flinch as my ears pop, one after the other. We're going down. This is all so sudden, all of this. It's just go, go, go. It's insane. Only moments ago, I was watching the chain get ripped out of the tower itself. What could do that? What kind of thing would have such power? And what if the whole length of the chain unravels? What then? The recent memories flash through my head, and I have to grab a hold of a nearby line of pipe to keep myself from staggering. Terry looks at me with sympathy. Hang in there, mate. You're better off in here than up there, trust me. They tell us they're losing the chain. I nod, breathing deeply in and out. In and out. Come on, I'll show you the exhaust valves. They aren't operating quite as they should be. Wouldn't normally be cause for major concern, but you know. These are relatively uncharted waters, if you'll pardon the pun. I don't respond, but straighten and follow him to the engine rooms further below. The rumble of the water around us is paradoxically rather calming, if I don't think about it too much. Terry continues. We're glad to have you. Our normal hydraulics guys were stolen yesterday for maintenance on the Hodder. The what? He gives me a look. Don't you know? The drill. It's an acronym. Hydraulics Operated Deep Drill. We call it the Hodder. Military folks sure love their acronyms. I remember what I had read in the report, in the secret file. All drilling operations to cease immediately. 1986. Report to Commander R. Cleese. I thought they stopped all the drilling. Yeah, for oil, obviously. But the Hodder's tiny. They send that thing down on rare occasions for samples from the seabed. Bewildered and struggling to process, I come to a stop in the engine room. Terry clasps me on the shoulder and directs me to the tools, then takes his leave, telling me where to find him if I need him. And so, like a programmed machine, I just set to work. I do what I do best. That's why I'm here, after all. I look around me as I work. There are no windows. I haven't seen any since entering the submarine. I quite like it. I can sort of pretend that none of this is happening. I can pretend I'm back on my own rig, working happily. I haven't been blackmailed into a military submarine. I'm not trapped hundreds and hundreds of meters beneath the sea. I was never sent to an uncharted rig in the middle of the ocean. I am not at risk of losing my life in a world of unimaginable nightmares. And I am not at the immediate mercy of an unspeakable terror that sleeps beneath the surface. Except it's not sleeping anymore. Is it, Reg? I push these thoughts aside and work as best as I can on the hydraulics before me. I don't know how much time passes, but once I believe I've completed my task to a satisfactory degree, I clamber back up through the levels and head through the submarine's corridors. They're narrow and cold. The clanks of my footsteps echo and reverberate softly around the walls. They're also curiously empty. I always imagined military submarines to be busier. I do, however, find some other people when I push through the metal door at the end of the corridor and into a room near the front and top of the submarine. A room affixed to the central hub. The level of light is low and green. The room is illuminated by a series of dim bulbs overhead. To my surprise, the front of this room is curved and not made of metal. It has instead been built with glass, or at least some other thick, transparent material. Beyond is only the deep and dark of the sea. The submarine's weak beam lights catch on nothing but water. There are 5 others in here with me. One is clearly the captain, a man in gray. He turns in his chair and nods at me. Another is Terry, who smiles. I'm still taken by the glass. What the hell is this? I ask. Military subs don't have walls of glass, do they? I thought they were solid metal. Terry shoots me another questioning look. Well, of course they don't. But this isn't a typical sub, is it? Some of the other members of the crew have turned to look at me with similar curiosity. One of them, I realize to my bewilderment, is shrouded in what appears to be religious robes of some kind. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I choke out. What are you doing on board? Well, I'm the submarine chaplain, he replies cautiously, raising an eyebrow. What? You mean like a priest or whatever? Why would they need one of those on a submarine? Everyone is staring at me now. The confusion on their faces, even greater perhaps than the confusion on mine. It becomes clear that I am not the type of person they were expecting to get sent to them. Their silence is sharp. The engine grinds. The sea rumbles. And then several of them lean forward and start asking me questions at once. Wait, you were briefed, right? You've done the exposure training. You do know about the entity, right? Did you even get the psychological assessment? No, I stammered in return. I really don't. I just wanted to. Fuck! Man in the gray beard shouts suddenly, running his hands through his hair. Who the hell sent you down here exactly? The commander did, I replied with frustration. For fuck's sake. What the hell is his problem? This is fucking insane. You shouldn't be here. I know, I splurted out in retort. The chaplain steps towards me. He takes my hands in his and speaks earnestly. Are you religious, son? Are there any spiritual convictions you feel comfortable drawing from? Not really, no, I replied. Look, if someone could tell me what's going on, I would really, really appreciate it. Is there a passage from the Bible I could read out for you? Something to help ease your soul? The chaplain asks. I pull my hands away and grimace. I'm sure he's only trying to be helpful, but to be honest, his presence here is freaking me the fuck out. What kind of submarine needs a chaplain? I don't even know any Bible passages. Not really. I know a couple, maybe. classics. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. From dust we came, and to dust we shall return. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. He sure does. I mumble this last passage out loud. The chaplain nods at me. Yes, the Book of Job, Chapter 1. A work of true literary prowess. Alfred Lord Tennyson himself called it the greatest poem of ancient and modern times. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Where have I heard that name before? The gears turn in my head. I could see before me so many pieces of the puzzle in my mind's eye. I just cannot fit them together. The eyes of the crew bore into me as we stand together, cast in the grim, green glow of the submarine's luminescent bulbs. I'd like a reading from the Book of Job then, please, I say quietly, as the submarine pushes through the deep. The radar blinks silently. The chaplain nods and draws a small Bible from his pocket. Certainly, lad. Any particular passage? The numbers scratched on the wall in the rig library return to the forefront of my mind. 41, 1, 34. Yes, actually, I mutter. Chapter 41, verses 1 to 34. The chaplain furrows his brow but nods. I'm not familiar with this particular passage, I must admit. He thumbs through the pages, and as he scans over the lines, he pauses and shoots me a look. I hold his gaze, and, perhaps reluctantly, the chaplain begins his reading. His voice is deep and somber, every word a wave upon the rocks. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? The atmosphere in the room tightens at once, but the chaplain licks his teeth and continues uninterrupted. The cadence of his speech like drums, dark drums drawing us down into the depths. Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you, for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do so again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it, overpowering. None are fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. The chaplain's chest rises and falls in time to the beat of his words, but I am not audibly aware of his drawing in of any breath. He dutifully reads on through the verse. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. His readings bring me nothing but distress, and I can see the distress reflected in the face of the crew around me. their features caught in the shadows of the rippling green. But they can no more ask him to stop than I. It is hypnotic. The chaplain goes on, but as sure as the night must fall with the sunset, he too must eventually draw to a close. And he does so, with a voice that shudders and ripples down through my core. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature with no fear inside. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all who hold pride. Shapes emerge through the darkness ahead. The external beams of the submarine reveal a section of the great chain through the murk, and I watch as we drift past it. There is energy in this place, in this submarine, in this secret world beneath the stormy seas. I drop my gaze to meet the eyes of the captain, the man in gray. Please, just tell me, I whisper. Tell me about the entity. A beat passes. The man in gray turns his back to me and looks out into the water, adjusting the submarine's course. But he replies, "The entity was discovered by the old drills in 1986. He says somberly, "We don't know what it is, to be frank. Nobody does. I admit, however, that it is entirely possible for the folks at the top to know more. They're just keeping the information a secret. The sonars give us an idea, a rough picture of the entity's form. But we have never been able to see it all at once. We believe it to be asleep, but it's always churning, ever-changing, writhing in the deep." Shiver passes through me. The man in gray speaks on. "The entity seems to be more or less alert with the varying cycles of the moon in different seasons of the year. We use firepower when necessary to try and push the entity in directions we deem desirable and keep it down with the chains. There are further chains connected to the other 3 primary rigs: UKB, the Norwegian rig, and the Danish rig. The chains were easier to attach at the beginning." He swallows. "It's harder now, they tell me. They're afraid. Afraid that the entity is going to wake up. Though, given tonight's reports from the rig, it's quite possible that the entity's sleep has come to an end." My head throbs, and my mouth has gone death dry. But I lick my lips and give voice to my clouded thoughts. "So, why don't you just destroy it? Nuke it or whatever? Surely it must be more cost-effective and less dangerous than whatever the fuck is being done right now, right?" "It's not about the entity itself, Reg," says Terry to my left. "What do you mean? How can it not be about the fucking monster? The massive, sprawling..." Intel suggests Reg that the entity is sitting on something, slumbering above it. Something important. Important beyond our understanding. The current working assumption is that the entity is situated above what we believe to be a gate. Of what manner exactly we don't know, but the fear is, he sighs, the fear is that if the entity goes, if we actually succeed in destroying it, then whatever lies beneath the gates, it would be wide open. I finish. Unguarded, perhaps. Terry nods. And we don't know what might come through from the other side, he says. Shadows dance in the corners of my vision. A deep and terrible cosmic fear rushes through me. I have never before felt such a sudden and powerful surge of vicious realization, of understanding, of seeing for the first time how utterly, truly tiny I am, how comically insignificant. I am barely comparable to the smallest spark in the shortest wire in the most purposeless machine on the entire rig. Bile rises up from my throat, and I choke it down. My stomach contracts, my breaths become sharp and shallow, in time to the sudden beeps of the sonar. And I am vaguely aware of everyone rushing back to their stations. I can feel the submarine further adjust its course. The chaplain is muttering under his breath, a low and steady chanting, and the shifting gray-black shapes beyond the submarine's windows light up a little brighter, with a boost to the beams. The beams reflect off massive lines of chain, all interwoven and connected, dragged across the submarine's field of vision through the deep. They're huge, so impossibly huge. And the water, in places beneath and around the chains, hardens. It shimmers in ways that don't make sense. It absorbs the light like the black of space, and yet somehow seems to return it in strange new patterns across its form. Shifting gray to green to black, over and over. I cannot look away. I am aware of shouting voices. The vessel shudders and fires. Torpedoes are launched through the water ahead. And when they connect with their target, with the terror beyond size, they flash, just for a second, providing only the briefest of glimpses of their surroundings. They show me colossal, writhing, long and interwoven limbs, jointless and furious. A flash. Further sections of chain that ensnare them, pulling taut, grinding. A flash. Great black and shifting rune-like lines and markings across these titanic appendages. I can hear a song. It flows with the roaring beyond in the deep. The melody, jarring at first, changes rapidly. It becomes quickly soothing, and the sound of it makes me feel. It makes me feel calm. It comes with none of the dread I felt with the words of the chaplain. Instead, it makes me feel whole, like I matter. I take a step closer to the glass. The submarine weaves its way through the chains. A flash. I see the material of the great twisting limbs pulled taut over something skeletal, the size of a mountain. A flash. I see one of the limbs thunder through the dark water, right in front of the glass. The submarine takes a hit and I stumble to the floor. A siren blares. But still I do not look away. A flash. And I see an eye. Out there in the dark. I look into it, and it looks back into me. The membrane peels back, and a brighter eye pushes through. The pupil, long and rectangular. The pupil breaks apart into smaller circles beyond count as I watch, mesmerized. And it splits open further. The surface of the eye rolls back to reveal only darkness, pitch void, nothing. And the world goes black. I dream only of the song. Its melody does not dissipate when I wake. I am in a medical bay of sorts. Not sure where. The presence of the commander at the far side of the room would suggest. I am back on the rig. A window is visible in the corridor, beyond the open door. The pale light that streams through would imply that the rig survived the night. For a moment, we exchange no words. Then I break the tension. You saved the rig, then? Aye, the commander replies. My head spins. My joints ache like hell, and the song is still playing. You found a way to calm it? The entity? There's always a way, the commander replies grimly. His eyes do not leave mine. He clenches his jaw. Another pause, then. Thank you, I whisper. The man's eyebrows shoot up. His surprise at these words is clear. Thank you, he repeats. Why the hell would you be thanking me? You knew I wanted answers, right? I reply with a weak grin. But you weren't able to tell me directly. That's why you sent me to the submarine. So that I could find some? The commander chews his tongue. He does not return my grin. Is that what you think? He replies quietly, his voice strained. A flicker of emotion passes over his face. Regret? Pity? Or perhaps guilt? He turns away. You seem like a decent guy, Reg, he says to me. I'm sorry they sent you here, truly. And I'm sorry I sent you down to the submarine. In the state you were in last night, you would have done nothing for the rig, but drum up further panic. And whilst the failure of the hydraulics section cannot be placed entirely on your absence, we do not know how the night might have unfolded if you had remained at your post. I swallow. The sounds of the song fade momentarily. Did anyone, did anyone die last night? I'm not sure if I even want to know the answer. But my compulsion for information bids me ask regardless. Commander sighs. 14 from the rig, and we lost the destroyer. Copters are still plucking survivors out of the sea. A destroyer. They lost an entire destroyer. I try to imagine the chaos that took place in the waters whilst I was beneath the surface in the submarine. How did it go down? Did the entity breach the surface? Was the warship torn in half like a toy? Smashed into pieces by a length of rogue chain? Crushed into shrapnel to the drums of the hammering thunder? I wonder if it had been Captain Iron's destroyer. I wonder if he made it out alive. There's no way my absence was responsible for the destruction of the tower, for the damage caused by the chain. There's no way. There's just no way. I was a part of a team of 10 others. I couldn't have had that much impact. There's just no way. But still, these rationalizations do little to ease the guilt. The song helps. It returns. It soothes me. The commander tips his cap, his expression grim, and makes to depart. But he pauses at the door and turns back to me one last time. Reg, he says, do yourself a favor. Just keep your head down, do your work, and take the ship to the debrief in Norway in 3 days' time. His good eye shines with sorrow before he turns to leave. And quit snooping around. I know you were in the backroom cabinets. If I catch you in there again, I'll throw you overboard. An attempt at a joke, I think. He chuckles awkwardly, and I chuckle back. But the air is one of sadness. The song helps. It mellows me. I listen to it play through my head as the commander leaves, and his footsteps echo away down the corridor. And for the next 2 days, I follow the commander's advice. I try my hardest. The chain is gradually hauled back in, pneumatic reels affixed to the groaning under the strain. Supposedly, hopefully, doing their jobs. Helicopters bring us parts and grids of metal for repairs. Platforms are clearly of debris. The work goes on. But I am present only in body. My mind twists and turns and constantly swirls. I dwell upon the mysterious scratchings left by figs on the library wall, the true nature of the entity, the things I heard and saw in the dark beneath the icy waves. I think about the files locked away. I know the combination. I could go back. I could try and learn more. The gate. I could try and find out what lies beneath the gate. I wonder how they managed to stop the entity. If it's truly awake. And the song just keeps playing. I find myself humming along to its haunting melody. Other workers shoot me glances as the days progress. I have to keep checking myself. The song agitates and stresses my thoughts and theories into a fever. I begin to wonder if there are ways back onto the submarine. Just for another look. One more look at the entity. That's all I need. Just one more look. One more look. I think about the eye. Terrible. And yet incredible. The following nights are eventful, as I had come to expect. But none are so wild and chaotic as the night that the chain was torn from the tower. The storm rages on, but the warships are not called into action. They watch cautiously from the sidelines out at sea, as the waves crash ceaselessly against their hulls. And on the 5th day, I find myself here, in the break room, enjoying a rare and not entirely within the rules burst of Wi-Fi, typing out my experiences into this email to you, Figs. Apologies for the formatting. I wanted the words to flow as my thoughts did at the time the events took place. I'm breaking the Secrets Act here, so don't screw me over. Besides, The connection keeps dropping. I'm not sure if this email will even ever get to you. Maybe if it does, this will be the time you finally reply to me. I hope you're alright, mate, wherever you are. A window in the wall beside me shows the approaching storm that gathers in the distance. Lightning cracks silently against the horizon, and the hairs on my forearms rise. I've taken a risk. I've gone against the commander's advice. An opportunity has arisen, you see. The hotter, the little drill that Terry told me about, is going down to the seabed tonight to collect samples. You can fit people inside it, about a dozen or so. I requested to go down with them, down to the bottom of the sea, just for a chance at another glimpse. A glimpse of the entity. Not that I told them that, of course. I was refused, but I was informed by one of the officers that the pneumatic operated deep drill will also be going down there a little later in the night, for the same purpose, I presume. I've had a little look around it. It's a strange-looking thing, like a big metal square. Well, not that big. Big enough for maybe 6 or 7 people, connected to the rig via tubes and pipes and cables. The floor is made of 2 different types of metals, with a crack that runs down the middle. And they need volunteers. They're here in the break room with me now, waiting to be allowed on board. They're all chatting excitedly, asking all sorts of questions, guessing what they might find or see down there in the dark. And I'm going with them. I have to. I have to know. I just have to. I wish you could hear the song, Figs. It's like nothing I've ever heard before. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Anyway, I'd better sign off here. I think they're calling for us. Hopefully, mate, I'll get to see you soon. All the best. Reg.
Greetings, friends and fiends. It is I, Chronicler. We here at Creepy Spaghet would like to thank Darkly Gathers for allowing us to tell their story. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on these terrible tales. And make sure to check out the author in the links below. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer. as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends. And remember, we are darkness.